this morning. Well, it is not the 9:15 meeting.
Okay. Good morning. Today is Tuesday, July 1st, 2019. It's 9 a.m. We're in the city chambers, and I call the city commission special meeting to order. Those present with me today are Commissioner Luke, Vice Mayor McDowell, myself, Mayor Hanks, Commissioner Emmerich. We have Assistant City Manager Yarbrough down there. We have City Attorney Slayton. We have our Deputy Clerk Taylor, and then we have our chief is in the back. We got some more staff out here, so we're excited to have everybody here, and we're excited to be here.
Yay.
Stop laughing. I'm coughing.
We have a packed agenda, Mayor. We need to get
Packed
moving.
agenda, and we have a full house. So, Mr. English, I'd like to say to you a couple of reminders before we start this business. Turn off that cell phone, and your public comments are up here, my friend.
He does fill the room, doesn't he?
He does. He has that commanding presence.
You, Chuck.
Thank you, Chuck. All right, if we would please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, and if I could have Mr. Yarbrough lead that, it'd be fantastic.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, if I can get an approval of the agenda.
So moved.
And I'll second.
Motion on the floor by the Vice Mayor, seconded by Commissioner Luke. Let's take a vote.
I can't, there's no buttons to push.
I mean, it's showing on mine, but it must be not on hers.
Okay, no,
All right.
I'm just,
We'll take a voice vote if it doesn't work this time through. She joined,
Now I
oh,
got
there
it.
it is. That's working now, John, thank you. Got it. All right, let's take the vote. And that passes 4-0. Moving on to general business, discussion and possible action regarding the City of Northport 2020 state and federal legislative priorities. And Commissioner Carasone is now in the chambers. Assistant City Manager.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Due to the state legislature meeting earlier, they typically meet in March, but this year, the upcoming year, it's going to meet in January. Staff wanted to get ahead out of the curve and bring this to you. What we presented to you is your previous legislative agendas that y'all have supported, both at the state and in the federal. And we're just looking for some feedback. On the federal, you know, I've talked over with staff, and the only thing that y'all might want to consider adding, besides what, at least from staff's perspective, y'all may have other things you want to add or take away. We've gotten, what was Irma, almost 2 years ago at this point? Yeah. We still have $1.2 million sitting out there waiting for reimbursement back. We've only gotten a few $1,000s back, so one of the things you may want to consider, at least on the federal legislative agenda, is supporting any legislation that will streamline or give a time frame on reimbursements from FEMA. Something you may want to consider. And other than that, it's the field's wide open, and we're looking for some feedback and what would you like for staff to, along with the lobbyists, go after on your legislative priorities, both at the state and federal.
Is that it?
Yes, sir, that's it.
Okay, Commissioner Carasone.
Yeah, I think that you bring up a great point about the FEMA payback, but I think we should also add that when you have a municipality that is predominantly going to be supplying the infrastructure to house many people, as we all know that the city of Northport is the only place that'll have the shelters, that there should be additional funds to our
help
city
mitigate some of those
services
costs.
to mitigate the cost, whether it be a shared cost or what have you, but I think it really needs to be addressed.
Maybe it,
I think that's a great idea, absolutely.
as a good idea. Now, I think, I don't know if it's at the county level or at the Anyway, yeah, I think.
It's the state that actually deems where the
Right.
evacuation centers are going
Right.
to be. And unfortunately, we're in a situation where we have the newest infrastructure
Right.
versus anyone else.
We're subsidizing Charlotte.
And we're subsidizing both Port Charlotte as well as all those to the north, so
Gotcha.
in Sarasota County.
At a state or federal you're talking about? Are you wanting
That would be
FEMA?
federal, FEMA.
You're wanting FEMA to step up and take, help out with the reimbursement of shelters?
Or at least have some sort of reimbursement when when we are supplying most of the city's support, when other counties and other cities and other areas are coming to us. Because remember, that's taxing on our transportation system, our city's services, as in the police, the fire.
Roads.
Yeah, I mean.
Wondering how they would
yeah.
write it into FEMA that they address federally.
Well,
I mean,
that's why they
There
make
needs
the
to be
money.
some type of, something written into it where.
Correct.
Because otherwise it is a state issue.
Well, yeah. well,
Maybe
the-
it could go into both.
It's FEMA that requires where and what types of
Shelters.
shelters there are, and they have to certify it. So it's actually a federal issue, and the money just funnels down into the state, and then into the counties, and then into the cities. So I see it more as a federal issue, but we could hit it on both sides.
I would hit it on both sides, and that way you're covering both areas.
I did forget one thing. The other thing is, staff's looking for, do y'all support the Florida League of Cities and National League of Cities legislative agendas as long as they don't conflict with your specifically stated agendas?
I don't know, some of the things that Florida League and National
asking.
League
Just
has.
trying to have a
just
conversation.
We are not supportive, but I'm sorry, go ahead.
We need to tell the lobbyists that, if that's how you feel.
Mr. Luke?
I'm going, Commissioner McDowell's wanting to state
Uh-oh.
something, I
Oh,
think,
I'm
on
sorry, go ahead.
that,
Before we
so.
moved on, I mean, Commissioner
No, you're
Carrison
fine.
had talked about hurricane reimbursement for using our shelters and stuff. But don't those services that we provide with the staffing and stuff, isn't that all part of FEMA? When we turn in the bill to FEMA for housing the hurricane shelters, for all of that, isn't that part of that 1.2 million that's outstanding?
We do seek reimbursement for that,
Okay, so
I'm right,
for any costs.
okay.
it's
Right.
related to it. So that's basically already being captured in that $1.2 million.
The service side of things, I'm talking about the aspect of beyond that, using our roadways, having to provide the service even after the fact.
Capital costs.
Yeah,
Okay.
thank you. I don't know how to explain it, but there is definitely a impact to the city by having to be the shelter area for all of,
But how does that relate to the
The
staffing
regions.
and stuff? I guess I'm not seeing what that overreaching is.
it's not just the staffing, it's also the fact that you're putting pressure on our infrastructure on all levels.
But I will assure
I
you,
don't
if you have a building
Yes,
with
yeah.
50 people in it, you need one person to watch. If you have a building with 500, you need about 20.
But we get reimbursed already for that.
Correct.
Oh, right.
So if you have a hurricane shelter that opens, that we have to staff and the school board has to staff, that's totally separate. We are already sending that bill for reimbursement, according to what Assistant City Manager said. So what I'm trying to understand is, what other costs are there outside of what we're already billing for?
Yet again, the pressures on our infrastructure.
What pressures on the infrastructure? What
You're talking
infrastructure?
about, I can only tell you from the last 3-4 hurricanes that I've gone through in this city. And that is that people come from all over the state because we're the only ones with dedicated shelters who can
understand
withstand a certain level of hurricane. They come from Dade County, they come from North Sarasota, they come from Punta Gorda. My point is that all those folks coming to the city puts pressure on, and it's probably once a year, if not, once every other year, on our infrastructure. Does that not make sense to you?
No, it doesn't, because
Okay.
the roads are
I
there.
don't know how to explain it then.
The roads are there, and if they're coming in for a hurricane for using our shelters
I will assure
for a
you,
weekend.
yeah, I will assure you, if you don't ask, you won't receive it.
It never hurts to put it out there.
But, but I do like especially what he was talking about, with the streamlining timeframes, because a lot of these things, I mean,
Oh, absolutely,
2 years
I
old,
agree
and
100%.
that's.
That one's a
We've only received a
definite.
couple of grand. I mean, really,
That
that
was
doesn't
supposed to
help.
be actually addressed last year,
Yeah.
and it never was. So that's kind of a problem on the.
Maybe stating that the priority is important to us because we are the area shelter for everybody around us.
We can do that as well. I just think we should get a higher per diem too, as being the primary.
Well, the FEMA process is very vexing. You not only have to upload all your expense reports into the federal system, but then you've got to do it again in the state system.
system.
And the two computer systems don't talk to each other, they don't share information, at least it was 2 years ago when I went through it with a different agency. It's, they lose information suddenly goes missing from the computer database. It's just a very tiring, vexing process to go through dealing with FEMA.
And didn't we just get paid for Hurricane Charlie, and I think Julie will remember, 2016? I mean, that was in 2002, right?
Or 2004.
Yeah, that's, from staff's perspective, federal grants have timelines and things that we have to meet. Maybe it's time for them to put a timeline on themselves about reimbursements.
Couldn't agree more.
Take a little bit of their own medicine. Commissioner Luke.
Pretty much a lot of the things that we have on our sheet, and I see this more as a discussion rather than question and answer kind of thing.
Right.
Is pretty much the same, except we do have that certificate of need that has been dropped. But I'd like to have a discussion about my thinking. I am learning that the taxation that is placed upon us because of Sarasota Memorial was put in through the legislators within the state. I would really like to see that undone. I have been looking in with the help of the city attorney, and there have been other municipalities that have abolished that through the legislators. So in order to enhance maybe or try to draw another hospital in, I would like to see this dissolved, or maybe have the taxation continue but go toward the new one. You can even set up a fund within your city, and as these indigent people are using it, then the city pays the hospital for this type of care, instead of just guessing, out of thin air how much they have really used of this $3.5 million that we pay in yearly.
I am so glad you brought that up. I was literally going to bring that up too.
Well, we had already given, to piggyback off that, we had already given the city attorney and city manager a direction to come back with ways to start to get that removed, to the taxes, and putting it in like an escrow account.
The only problem is as Commissioner Luke has addressed, it was put in place by legislators.
Right,
And so it
and
needs to
I
be
agree we
undone
need to
by
do that.
legislators.
Only be undone
that's the only
through
way.
them.
I understand that, but we had already given the direction to have the
I
city
don't
attorney.
remember that.
Yeah, yes, we did, and they are working on it to present it, but we
But we
have
need
this
to add
meeting
it.
today.
Yeah, we can add
And
it.
so, knowing that it has to be abolished through
Yep.
legislation, I would like to do so.
I agree 100%.
Maybe you guys can help me remember, a few years back, the other hospitals sued because
Yeah.
they also take care of indigent care, and they were wanting reimbursed back. And I don't know as that suit has really been finalized, but maybe the abolishment of this could help that case too.
Their suit was actually to appeal our certificate of need for the city of Northport's hospital. when we had a certificate of need go through, not only the first time, but the second time as well. And that's what they used as their litigation ploy to say that they're taking care of certain residents and that's why we should not be allowed a certificate of need. It was during the appeal
I'm
process.
talking a lawsuit that was like $750 million,
I don't remember.
because this was only a few years ago. And the rumor that I heard was that in order to avoid paying out, this might be undone and revert
Well, I can
back.
tell you, back in
So-
2001, the legislation was talking about getting rid of district hospitals, period, because it is a burden on the taxpayers, but it's also a burden on the state. And that may be something that becomes more viable now that the certificate of need is going away.
Can I let Ms. Slayton say something, because you had your name up there a minute ago? and I
Well,
wasn't
I just
able
wanted
get
to address the point about what the city attorney's office was directed to do, was to look into whether or not the city would have standing to challenge the hospital district, and that's a different issue than the one being discussed here. All hospital districts are created by legislation, by the state legislature. The boundaries are drawn, the hospitals that are affected are identified in that legislation. So if that's the nature of the city's issue, the only way that can be changed is through legislation.
And remove the boundaries within the city of Northport would probably be the easiest way.
To change the boundaries, to include other institutions,
Right.
to dissolve a district. You know,
Yeah.
it's a special district. It's a governmental entity that is created by the legislature that has taxing authority. So even if our research reveals that there's some way the city has to challenge that, which, as I told you in the meeting, I believe the answer is no, it's not going to accomplish any of those things. That can only be done by the legislature, and courts can't undo that.
And thusly why I'm bringing it up as a priority. It's something that we would have to have conversations with the other governments to see if the other governments are agreed, of removing the taxation within the county as a whole, or whether we do need to just go in to try to carve out Northport.
I think that's an excellent, I love the idea that you brought up, ways to address it. I personally was just looking at it from the taxation side of things, but I love the several different ideas that are creative thinking, so I'm in all support of that. I think that we should just have an overreaching kind of statement for both state, well, I guess it would only be state in
Only
this,
state,
in this case, but, that we want to either remove ourselves from the district or have the district dissolved altogether. But I love the idea of going around to different government entities or, within the district and finding out how they feel before we know what we actually push for when we go up for our legislative days.
Well, we asked for a joint meeting with the board of SMH, and to this point, we haven't heard an
Don't
answer.
hold your breath, we'll all
And
be
so we
dead.
were requesting to find out how that money was spent, how many of our indigent care
Mm-hmm.
are actually being covered. But in a city where we don't have a hospital, they're going to Port Charlotte, they're going to Venice, they might go up to Sarasota eventually, to all those other hospitals. But we don't have a SMH here to take care of indigent care. And if we have a new hospital that comes in, if we have this pool of money within our city, we could assist the hospital who chose us to come to.
I totally agree. I think it's fantastic.
I think that's a great idea, too.
Thank you.
Commissioner McDowell? Oh, did you have more?
No, that was the biggie change
Oh, okay.
that I wanted to see
Commissioner McDowell?
addressed.
Yeah, the biggest one that I have is for the technology part of it. We are constantly getting the phone calls, how come we can't get the internet? Why isn't the city helping us? And this is a state thing, and, I'm reading this very long thing, and just to even find technology on here, it doesn't stand out. We really need to make this issue stand out because the state is tying our hands. And I know we've had this conversation and gave direction, but I think this needs to be one of those standout priorities about technology in the city. We had talked about it affecting the schools, it affects our first responders, it's a life safety issue. Not only that, it's an economic issue. And I really think that this needs to be a standout item on this sheet.
To me, it's funding of infrastructure that needs to be addressed, which includes that technology, that internet, that is part of the infrastructure that is vital, and they do need to fund these cities. Instead of cutting taxes and bragging about themselves cutting taxes at that level, they place the burden, the financial burden on the local government.
Or
They
tie
need
our
to step
hands.
up. Yeah, they need to step up and start issuing some funding for infrastructure, which would include
I spoke with
technology.
3 citizens this morning about internet out in the estates, and apparently Frontier's telling them the reason that they don't have service from Frontier is because the city's not willing to put up the money that they're supposed to.
Oh, my word.
that's what
Liar,
they're-
liar, pants on fire.
Mayor, we had a conversation with Frontier about a year ago. They're not fixing anything that's down, they're just letting it rot away. The city has nothing whatsoever to do with their business plan.
And, I
Their
mean,
equipment.
Commissioner McDowell heard me on the phone as she was walking in. There's nothing we can do about that, and, telling these people that, some of what you're dealing with, if your phone's not working, you're paying full service. That's a civil issue. You're gonna have to get a lawyer. You're gonna have to, but.
I'd like to see, actually, this format change a little bit too. Nobody's going to read this.
That's your federal.
This is our state. It
Yeah,
says
the
state
state's
legislative
the
priorities.
wordy one. The federal is the
The
bullet
federal
point.
one is the bullet
I
point
wouldn't do,
one.
everything needs to be about a sentence.
Yeah, you're right.
Not much more than a
This-
sentence.
Nobody's going to read this.
Well,
Well,
to
we
be,
did it because we had so many that we
Right,
wanted
but
to
we
include.
can do the bulleted like we did on the federal, and
Yeah.
some of this maybe we can even cut out.
I was gonna say, even if we have to
I
shorten
mean,
the list.
we can take out the certificate of need, because yay, it takes effect today, that's now been abolished, so that's like one thing, yay, we could take off. Says here, the city of Northport, under infrastructure, supports state funding for widening of Inglewood Interchange Connector Road. We could probably take that off.
And say River Road, maybe?
It's already being
It's already
funded,
being
so why would
funded.
we continue?
Unless we want to focus now on the south side.
Exactly, I was gonna say, we need to focus on that south side.
Honestly, I think it might be in our best interest to take it off for a couple years, let them focus on the north side, and then all of a sudden slip it back in a couple of years, because they're gonna read that and go,
We've
we're already
done
doing
that,
it. Why,
yeah.
why is this still on here? And then they're gonna think that everything else is irrelevant.
That's why you need to be more specific, to look at funding sources for south of 41 on River Road, because it's going to take several years
I-
to get it, so it should be in there.
And I would, and I mean, whenever you do that, I would really look at too, some of the catastrophes that we've had going down that direction, and if you could include that. I mean, if you've had
Oh, it should
30
be,
deaths
yeah.
over the last 10 years because of suicide curve there or whatever it is, these are things that really jerk a heart to a voting representative,
And I can tell you that you'll get other governments to support that, the southern section, especially at Winchester, the intersection. You're gonna get Charlotte County and Sarasota County governments to absolutely support something that
Sure.
helps that southern side.
Nobody's going to say no
Right.
whenever you put it that way, whenever you show the,
Right now, it's owned by the county, not the
Right.
state.
Exactly, that's why.
Yeah, but they can help state funding
Right.
wise. I mean, the whole MPO funding is just a shambles, to have funding that goes out 25 years and you don't, you're never going to see it unless you've got it half paid for yourself. It's just, and then the hoops that you have to go through as a government versus as a private developer are ridiculous. I mean, why is it that the government has to do more to do certain projects versus the developer? It's just backwards.
yeah.
I just, I'd be more in favor. I understand the importance of doing it, but since it's a county road and they're already working on from 41 to the interstate, let them take a couple years off and then we'll put it back on as a priority. But that's, the only other thing that I'd like to see is city water, city sewer. I know that we had talked about that particularly for War Mill Springs area, but I think we need to have some kind of legislative priority for helping to fund for the city water, city sewer projects within the city, especially since a lot of this stuff is going to become even more relative as it moves through the environment and red tide and blue-green algae, all that kind of stuff. So those are just what I was thinking.
Thank you. Commissioner Image?
Okay, hold on. No, this goes back to where Commissioner Luke was talking about the hospital, and then I gotta go further back, because this button's been on, I'm not gonna use the button no more. No. What you were talking about in taking away from SMH, what I would suggest putting in the language is hospital or hospitals of choice for the funding, you know, as they fall under our parameters, like indigent care would be check, or whatever the case may be, check, and then, because the door's wide open, we may have more than one hospital in the future. So we may pick from 1 and 2, depending on what types of care they give and what we prioritize as a city to give them funding.
Well, that is a good point, because I think that's one of the problems with the organization of that districting. I believe it was done in the 1940s, something like that. They picked one hospital. And it's quite unfair that you just funnel these taxes to that one hospital when you have multiple that are taking care of the indigent care. If you have that pool of money within the city, and then the city issues the money as, you know, they bill the city, then it's fair across the board instead of just paying
You could even
one.
create it as a grant funding the way we have to, right? So they provide this indigent care, and then they've got to provide all the documentation to show how much indigent care that they provided, and then they can
That's exactly-
recoup the funds, just like any other.
And there
Government
are
has to do it.
places who already do that. That model is already out
Yeah.
there.
And that's what I was suggesting in the parameters. You
Yes.
know, it is the citizens' money, so as they take care of the citizens, then they get reimbursed according to the parameters.
They're not banking money,
Right.
And it doesn't monopolize one hospital,
exactly.
because if they're guaranteed the money, they may not care about the care.
Right.
But I think that would be an enticement to a hospital to want
Absolutely.
to come if we
Sure.
had that type of funding available.
Absolutely. And then I had one more
Yep.
thing. This goes way back to the assistant city manager. You had said about the Florida League of Cities and National League of Cities, it's already in there.
I just want to make sure y'all are still pushing that, and also supporting your sister cities and counties.
It's in there.
Yeah.
Yep,
in there. I just
it's,
wanna-
it's all right in there, and I think it's worded perfect for that, because it says, you know, unless it conflicts with our,
Correct.
you know, issues in our commission's position, so I,
Talking about state or federal, you guys keep
it's on
going
state.
back and forth,
I
back
just
and
read
forth.
that, I didn't know we were gonna bounce all over the place, but I was trying to stay just on the
Right.
state. So it's at the very end of the state.
Yeah, yeah.
Last sentence,
The public safety.
last sentence, last
Yeah.
paragraph.
No,
There's some.
That's all I had, thank you,
I
Mayor.
don't see it. So,
That sentence could come out, to be honest with you. Because we send a letter of support when there's you know, like if Charlotte County does something, we send a letter of support. If the county needs something, we send a letter of support. I think this is just common practice that doesn't need to be reiterated. That's just my opinion on it.
so
And to agree with that a little bit, because
I definitely agree with that.
this is a priority list. And I don't
This is our
see a
priorities.
priority being, you know, for us personally, a priority being to support somebody else.
Especially when in the league, sometimes you'll find that there's certain, I hate to say cliques, but certain cities that share a common interest, but it has nothing to do with us. And because they have different folks in leadership at the time, they can push those types of priorities through as league priorities where it doesn't affect us.
Well,
you
it
know?
has a clause, unless specific
Yeah, I
issues
know,
conflict
but-
with. So there's that
Take it out. It's not
loophole in there, but
ours.
I don't think the whole thing even
You
needs
get
to.
areas like Miami-Dade
ours.
that have all those surrounding areas,
Exactly.
and then you've got 30 municipalities going to the, FLC saying, hey, we're together on this. They're saying, hey, well, look, there's 40 people, it must be, but in reality, it's just one small section of the state,
Correct, correct. Well, if I could, Mayor, I would like to see us kind of reduce the stuff on here.
I would too.
As far as the federal, and I'll just start with the federal, I do think that the FEMA reimbursements being paid out quicker and the, being held accountable is absolutely a necessity. I also believe that we could look into the mitigated costs of sheltering the majority of citizens within one city and how that affects us, and then word something appropriately that would say that we need to be, if there's something that we need to be compensated for, then so be it. As far as federal side of things, that's kind of it's a tough one. I do believe that the reclassification of medical marijuana is an absolute necessity.
That's
Yeah,
on the
I know
bottom
it's
here,
in
it
there.
needs to stay.
And I would honestly just keep it at 3 or 4 bullet points, and I would make it as succinct and short as possible.
The fourth one down needs to stay, in my opinion. That's dealing with the infrastructure, which includes that broadband.
Yes, thank you. I was going to add that too, the broadband portion for the federal, because the federal side of things, they're definitely pushing for internet for all. And so I think we also have to add that in there as well. But I would really limit it to four things, sweet, to the
That's what a
point,
priority is,
bold,
right?
boom.
A
you
priority is
know?
not everything you have.
Exactly.
But I think maybe 4 is a little bit too little. I think we might need to go from 6. I mean, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. We have 11 on there. I think
lot.
if we go to 6 of them, I think that would be better, because a lot of these things are really, really important.
Well, a lot of them are overlapping though, too.
Correct.
So for instance, you could put on here the I-75 Yorkshire Exchange, but isn't that honestly just infrastructure? If you're going to do something, then have it one bullet point, we support infrastructure. For example, new interchange, relief of local roadways.
Well, as long as-
and access to internet for all. You know what I mean? Boom, you're done.
Actually, I like how the legislative one is on the federal right now, the way it is. We can probably shorten it up if a couple of them can come off, but we need to follow that same format on the state.
Well, I just think that nobody's going to read all this, so, I mean, especially the whole City of Northport funding Wyden River Road and Price Boulevard. Again, that's infrastructure. And when you talk one-on-one is when you bring up these specifics and you show them a map and you show them what we can and can't do, and because they're looking at this, they don't even know where River Road and Price is, I promise you.
But what if you go up to bullet point 4, swing transportation to the end after water and utilities, and then mention including widening of roads and intersections on 75,
Yeah.
or
that's
interchanges, I'm
Pretty
sorry.
much, yeah.
And just close it at that. That eliminates two of
And then
those
have
bullet-
the internet access for all as a separate point? Because that is a federal priority this year.
I don't know, Mayor, if you want to start getting some
Yeah, that's what
consensuses
I
on
was
the
gonna
books.
say. Why don't-
Because we're having a
Yes,
great
Why don't we
discussion.
do this? Let's get a consensus on what was just mentioned.
Okay, so you want me to reiterate?
Yes, please.
The faster reimbursement from FEMA, that's their new name, FEMA, after disasters, and to have staff determine if there's any mitigated costs related or needed by providing the shelters for the overall region.
Commissioner Loop? Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes.
Hemorich? Okay, so that's a consensus across the board.
Okay, that's one bullet point. The next would be to, and I'm not going in priorities.
Right.
You know what I mean? You guys can play what you want. The next is change classification for medical marijuana.
Commissioner Loop?
Yes.
It's on there. What are we changing?
What?
It says here, the city of Northport supports changing the classification.
I
of
know, I'm saying to get rid of this and only have
I
4 or 5.
didn't hear that part.
I'm sorry, to have 4 or 5
Oh, yeah, we're just
bullet points.
rewriting it now, so,
I
so
didn't hear
whatever
she
we.
wanted to get rid of that
Oh,
part.
sorry. Yeah, so whatever we're putting on, right now, our consensus will be the only thing on this, so.
Correct.
So we're working with a blank slate right now.
That's what I'm trying to get at, yeah.
So, yes,
Yes.
yes, yes. Yes, so that's across the board.
Now, the third one would be infrastructure needs and supporting funding for those infrastructure needs that would include, but are not limited to, widening of local roads, interstate exchanges, water quality, healthcare services. I mean, you could just kind of pick some things out of here and create a bullet point.
One bullet point with little
Yep.
sub-bullet
Yep.
points.
Yep.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Yes.
McDowell?
Yeah, one bullet point with subs.
I'm a yes, Commissioner Emmerich.
Yes.
That's across the board consensus.
And then another one would be internet access for all. And I don't know how you want to word it, because there may be some federal bills out there that we want to jump off of.
So you want to remove high-speed broadband out of the infrastructure?
No.
Making it its own work?
Yeah, it's in
I would
infrastructure.
separate it and make
Yeah, I
it
would
its own
separate it.
entity.
Be separated and on its own, but how you word these is totally up to you.
Yeah.
I'm not, please
So-
don't use
so,
my word for
Jason, just-
word.
Just for your record, whatever is on there now, it's blank, and we're
Right.
re-putting back on there. So whatever we don't hit will not be on there anymore, yeah.
And then I would just say, to address the
Yes, yes, it was across the
the
board.
internet access, yeah.
Oh, I believe so. Commissioner
Yes.
Loop? Yes, yes. Emmerich?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, it's across the board.
And then the last thing I would add is, while it's being addressed this year and last year before, I would address veterans' needs. And it goes beyond healthcare. There's been a huge suicide outbreak for veterans. There's homelessness, there's healthcare needs. And so I think that we should put addressing veterans' needs. And if we want to put sub-points, we can. But I can just tell you, as a daughter of a veteran, they are severely lacking.
If I may, Mayor.
Go ahead.
We have items 1 and 2, top priorities. First one is veterans, affordable housing and workforce housing. Housing, hold on. It says housing opportunities for veterans, affordable and workforce housing. And then the second one, it goes into saying about the mental health, including suicide prevention and care and treatment. So we have those on there. Do you want to add veterans to promotes the funds and strengthening of mental health system for Americans and veterans?
Yeah, it
I
sounds
mean,
like to me that
Americans
we're
and
trying to
veterans
con-
are the same
yeah, it sounds like we're
thing.
trying to consolidate those
We
and
were,
and add.
again, let's rephrase it one more time. Pretend this isn't here. This doesn't exist, okay?
Blank slate.
I'm saying that just these 5 bullet points, and then if you want to take pieces out of this to make it more logistically understanding, then fine.
Why
The
don't we
bullet
do
points then
the,
is what I'm going to say.
why don't we do with the veteran support, the same thing we're doing with the infrastructure? And then have the bullet point being veteran, or supporting of veterans, and then those
The
sub
sub-points,
points.
healthcare,
Homelessness,
homelessness.
healthcare.
Yes.
Mental health.
But this isn't
Suicide.
something that's just, I'm all for the veterans. I think everybody understands that. But we also have to look at the affordable housing, workforce housing, mental health for everybody. I don't want to just limit it to the veterans. That's the point I'm trying to make.
I think, though, but if you're going to get, I think if you're looking for the greatest return on response, specifying out a group like veterans would do that, because nobody wants to go against that. If you just
Right.
make it general, it's easy to say, it's easy just to overlook.
Or to say, we're already addressing that, but you're only addressing 1/10 of the whole overall reaching priority.
In my opinion, the veteran is proper within the federal, and then when we swing into the state,
State.
then we broaden it to all citizens at the state level.
State level, yeah. Well, that makes sense.
And that's, I have that on my state, I haven't even gotten to the state yet. So,
All right, so Commissioner Luke, that is to title it as veterans needs and then put these other bullet points below it that we see on the first two.
Yes.
Commissioner McDowell?
Yeah, I'm torn because it's not just for the veterans. We have the need for all Americans.
Well, I think what Commissioner
And
Luke's,
I understand that it's going to get more focus by being just the veterans, but I don't like just singling out the one. I think it should be all-encompassing, and that's my opinion.
I understand that thinking, but I think you have more bang for the buck putting it within the state. Then the state can hound the federal for everybody. But the veteran is focused within the federal level, not the
Exactly.
state.
exactly.
So I think you have more bang for your buck again, addressing the veteran there,
But-
instead of just listing everything that we think is
If you
important.
listen to our federally elected representatives, workforce and affordable housing and mental health has been at the forefront. They're starting to hear us. And to just isolate it to the veterans, I think is going to take away for everybody else. And that's my position, if you want to move on there.
Commissioner Emmerich?
Yeah, I'm with it. I like the veterans.
I'm not saying I don't.
I meant in the statement, absolutely. You know,
Way to go, Debbie. Oh, my gosh. Oh, that's funny. All right, and I'm a yes too. I do understand Commissioner McDowell. I just believe focusing, and I like what Commissioner Luke says, bringing the everything to the state. I think it might actually help streamline some of the thought processes. So I'm a yes. So that is a consensus.
And that's really it. I would just focus on those 5 bullet points. I would kind of, wordsmith them so that they kind of include some of the things that we already have on our federal guidelines, but make them more generalized. And then when we do go see them in March or April or whenever we go this year, then we can come with actual, okay, this is our priority and here's why. This is how it affects us in our state, in our city, and these are our ideas. Because I don't know how many times I can say that legislators want to know, they want to know how are you going to fix it. It's great to come and complain, but we want to know how you're going to fix it. So I would just keep it short, sweet, to the point. I love the idea that the front page has more to do with, our city and the specifics of our city. And then, yep, and that's how I would do it.
Yeah, Commissioner McDowell.
We have a priority, I know we're cleaning this whole thing and it's a clean
you're-
slate.
There you go.
But one of the priorities last year that is starting to get a lot more recognition and a lot more awareness is the opioid crisis that's happening. School safety and homelessness, I think, is maybe it's still a priority, but we could probably just keep that 3rd bullet point as is and add it to this clean slate.
And the federal side?
See, I see it more of a state
Yeah.
again.
I do too. What?
No, they don't read this anyways.
well,
Why are we doing this? They don't listen to
Upset
it.
over it then.
Because we're, just,
couldn't we just add that to like one of the sub-bullet points when we were
It's
talking
not
about health
necessary.
and welfare?
it's not necessary, we'll just keep it off.
Do that in the state side.
Oh, I'm Just saying, it could have fit as one of the sub-bullet points in the health and welfare issues that we discussed earlier.
I would be okay with it.
That's where I would put it.
Yeah.
I made the suggestion, if it doesn't get support, it doesn't get support. I
Well, you
don't,
have two that are willing to put it as a bullet point.
Yeah, but we don't have anything under federal that would be under, I mean, are you gonna talk about
Well, I guess it would-
opioids
well, it would have
and
been in the-
veterans, or it, I mean, if
I mean, I think
we,
that's a good place for it too.
okay.
I mean, I'm
That's
not,
about the only place.
well, I mean, it would be the only place in this one, but
Mm-hmm.
I do know
This
that
is
it is a
not-
problem across. It's not just, I mean, it's veterans, it's everyone.
Oh, I know, but, and they are also addressing this very,
Right.
very, very,
Aggressively.
yeah, a little too aggressive in some cases. So, I mean,
I go back to, I love my veterans, but this is a nationwide crisis. And I know, I can see you roll your eyes, so I'll just.
I am.
Well, I was
I am.
because you said I love my veterans, and I was laughing at Mr.
The
Emmerich.
reason we ended up.
Again,
The reason we ended up with such long list last year is for the very thing that we're doing right now and continuing to add every detail.
Exactly.
Looking at it, and I think going back to more of a simplified, I mean, we support a whole lot more than what's on here.
I think your lobbyists would agree with a more focused approach.
Thank you.
Cuts through versus trying to do a shotgun where you hit everything and anything.
Not trying to hit everything. I'm trying
no,
to
I-
focus
I-
on
I wasn't-
things that
I wasn't trying
affect
to say
our
that either.
community that we need to make sure stay focused. That's all.
I think the other problem
We'll
is
just move
that, you will find that in certain areas that opioids are not really as much of a problem anymore. The heroin and the fentanyl and the other types of substances are now taking over for what was an opioid issue. And so that just falls under the whole health and safety and well-being, and that is
I do believe
something that I'm
that
gonna
heroin
address
is
in
an
the state
opioid, though.
side.
yes.
Well,
It'll
it
still
is,
fall
but
under
it's
the
a
same
different schedule.
categorization of addiction.
understand that,
It's
yeah.
just progressing to that stage.
Different classification too, so. Okay, so anyways, can I move on to the state, or is there anything else?
I'm okay.
I'm good.
Federal as is with the 5 bullet points and then those 2 sections with sub-points.
Yep,
All right, let's move on to state then.
okay, state,
Abolish district hospital.
correct. The abolishing of district hospitals or creating an independent, I don't know how
Do
you
you really
would.
want to abolish that funding source, or do you want to keep it localized inside the city?
Well, I think it's more about dissolving our municipality from
Restructuring.
it.
Restructure.
Yeah,
Because then we could create ordinances concerning any of that if we
Correct.
wanted to, correct? You know, if we wanted to say, listen, as a city, we want to help the indigent care with these hospitals that are in our city, then we have the ability to do that.
Well, I would,
In the
I mean,
future.
I would say
I see what you're saying.
restructure / abolish, because when the other governments get involved with us, they may want to abolish it completely. So if you're gonna just state restructure, you're throwing out the ability to
Right.
abolish it.
Can I nuance it a little bit? So
Yeah.
if you do restructure, you're interested in having more control over where the revenue goes, or you want to keep it more geographic inside the city, specific to the city of Georgia?
I'd like to.
Either or.
Yeah, either or. I'd like to know where the money
Yeah,
goes.
I don't think we want to be told who we're giving our money to.
Right, right. But then again, SMH may deserve some of it.
Right, and
See,
no, I'm not-
but let's see what their report shows.
oh, good luck with that. What if we just addressed it more on a basic level of saying addressing
Not to mention any specific
hospital?
hospital per se.
Right, that's what I'm trying to get at, is addressing district hospitals and the desire to have municipalities deem whether they need to be in it or not, or how to utilize that funding to best benefit their citizens. I mean, something that's kind of generic until we figure out where other governments are, because I know we're kind of up against a timeline for this one because of the legislative priorities.
We're a charter county, right, here?
Yes, we are.
Yes.
Is it something that might be able to be handled at the county charter level?
It can, Well, no, not the hospital, getting out of the hospital,
Well,
no.
not getting out of the hospital district, because that was created by the state legislature, but if
I think it's got to be legislation as well, right?
Well, in the legislation, this particular hospital district does provide reports to the county of how it's using its funds and.
Right, but it's not broken down by municipality. It's kind of like an overall, because we've tried for years to get it broken down and they refuse to. So I don't know, I think that like an overall statement until we get more information that says, you know, we're open to continuing the funding, but being able to utilize it for almost like a TIF, tax increment finance, that we could take it and put it in a bucket all on its own and use it towards healthcare needs for our citizens. Because that's similar. I mean, it's already existing in other types of funding sources in the governments. That might be a way to address it as well.
How about we just make it a priority to restructure the district hospital, and that way then we have the quick bullet point, we can talk about it and explain things, keeping it short and sweet. Because restructuring could include abolishing it, could include anything. It's a conversation starter. This is, I think, the first time they're going to see this.
The only reason why I wouldn't word it quite that way is only because I think that it sounds like you want the hospital itself to go in and fix its administration and maybe its infrastructure.
Well, then add it.
I want to,
What about redesign?
or
What if you did
requesting,
restructure and/or abolish?
but restructure is still not a good word.
But
I
it's
mean,
it's the legislative document that needs to be looked at.
so it's amend the legislative.
I like that.
Yeah, amend the legislation that created the district to allow more control within our municipality.
More local control.
Yeah, something,
Give local
Something.
control.
something. Right?
Yeah.
Okay, so that would be like the first bullet point. Anyone? Can we get a consensus on
Commissioner
that?
Luke? Yep, just went down. Okay, that's across the board.
Next would address the internet access again. And granted, the federal government is focusing a lot on making sure that everyone has access, but I think on a state level, they could do a lot more to help with local services and maybe even lessen the taxes on some of these providers.
they could also unshackle the local governments
Correct, from
you know,
creating.
that they slapped on, you know, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago.
Yep. So I think that there's different bullet points, you know, the mini bullet points we could put under there as ideas maybe, that we could have staff kind of put together. But I think in the state side of things, we have to be a little bit more specific with what they can do to make, to actually achieve the goal of making internet access for all. Does everyone all right with that?
And 3B infrastructure with the bullet points.
It is. I haven't gotten there yet. So that was the internet part. And then number 3 I have is fund infrastructure. And yes, I would add bullet points to include, you know, the southern portion of River Road. I would include water and sewer changing, let's see, what else is on here? I guess
Interchange. the-
interchange, local
Widening of
roads. I would just kind of look through these, because a lot of this is infrastructure. Look through this and kind of see if there's ways that you can create a bullet point along, you know, the infrastructure side of things. I wouldn't do too many sub-points, though. I would literally only stick to 3 or 4 little bullet points underneath the big one.
That's
That
really
makes-
all you need on
Yeah.
any of them.
Yeah.
Only one or two words with those bullet
Yeah.
points too, not a lot.
For the infrastructure, did you include, like water and sewer out to
I did.
Long Meadow Springs?
I did, well,
Well,
water and
water
sewer,
and sewer,
period,
yeah.
you know, because,
We need it.
I like how it's done on this current one, putting that under environmental, because I believe there needs to be an environmental bullet point, and then addressing those, the aquifers, the water quality that gets into it, so I think environmental.
Yeah, and I've
a
got no
topic
issues with that. That's where I was reading
Let me get
it
a
from.
consensus on the infrastructure one that we just went through. Commissioner McDowell, did you have something? I have your light on. All right, do we have a consensus with the infrastructure the way it was?
I
Yes.
don't agree with River Road, so I'm going to be a no. I'm for everything else. I just think that if we're keeping it short and sweet and bulleted points, they see River Road, they're going to, even if you say southern end of River Road, they don't know where that is. So that's why I'm saying just take that out for a year or two. Let's get River Road, the north, the 41 to 75 taken care of. Save the space for something else.
Commissioner Emmerich, do you agree with the consensus, or you agree with Commissioner McDowell?
I agree with the consensus. I'd like to leave it in there just to keep them on it.
Commissioner Luke, do you?
Yeah,
you
just
wanna
so
leave
it
in?
stays south river, yes.
So you have a consensus.
okay, next would be the public safety. And that's where we would get into the homelessness, drug addiction, suicide prevention, children's safety, which would the DCF issues would fall under. I think that's about it. I mean, the others are kind of common sense. I hate putting bullet points on there that are common sense, you know what I mean? But,
Yeah, sometimes you need to.
but some, yeah, that's why homelessness and,
Excuse me.
and,
I apologize, what was the bullet point?
suicide prevention, homelessness, substance abuse, and what the hell was
Can we
that?
just lump it as mental health?
Safety and wellness.
Housing can go in there.
I have homeless.
Affordable housing is separate from
Yeah.
homelessness.
So then may, instead of homeless, say affordable housing, because I think that's what I meant
They're
when I
two
wrote.
separate things. Homelessness and affordable
I
housing.
understand that. What I'm saying is that I made a mistake by saying homelessness. I meant affordable housing. That's what I'm saying.
Do we want to have homelessness and affordable housing?
I wouldn't. I just want affordable housing. But that's up to you guys.
Commissioner Luke, would you like homelessness in there?
Yes.
Yes?
Because I
Two
think if
separate
you
items.
create affordable housing, you address homelessness, if you know what I mean.
Maybe to a certain point.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a constant fix.
No, because those who are chronically homeless, that is where you get into the mental health.
No, I understand that, but I agree, it is a separate point, and that it should be stated as such.
And so you want it in there?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and I do too. So that's consensus to leave
Okay,
homelessness
so we
in there.
got suicide prevention, affordable housing, and homelessness.
These are sub-bullet points underneath?
Yep.
Yeah, under the public safety. Didn't you mention something
Substance
about children?
abuse. Mental health.
What about, didn't you mention something about
I
children?
did. I just can't remember how I said it. Is there
I
a
don't-
way that you can?
Yeah,
children's safety.
Because I was specifically thinking of like
Yep,
DCF, the
that's-
things that you're
Yep.
really active with. Which I think
All right,
is very
so mental
important.
health and children's safety would be the last. Affordable, all right, so suicide prevention, affordable housing, homelessness, substance abuse, mental health, and children's safety. That's what I got.
Commissioner Luke,
Yes.
you good? Commissioner McDowell? And I'm good, Commissioner
Yes.
Emmons? Okay, that's consensus across the board.
Okay, and then
Environmental?
I heard one more that says environmental, which means that we would remove the water and sewer from the infrastructure and put that under environmental.
I think it should be in both places.
Yeah, I
It should be
would.
both places.
Absolutely.
So restate it in environmental?
They can word it so it's a little bit different, but both areas do address that topic.
Okay. So isn't it just sewer, though, when we're talking environmental, not really water?
Because water, in this case with the environmental, is the Gulf, the ponds, Okeechobee.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I meant the utilities. I meant water and sewer as in utilities, not ponds and,
I mean, in our city, you're using those creeks and stuff, and you have reclaimed water, that's part of the utility, all that type of stuff needs to be, yeah.
Yeah,
okay, so
stormwater.
that's not what I'm thinking, but, okay, so you're talking about stormwater and ponds and, okay. And water bodies, I guess, is what you're really,
Well, you got stormwater
Right.
mitigation programs.
yeah. So you get a general idea, water, and you can figure it out, water bodies and stormwater and holding.
Speaking of water, which speaks of storms, shelters, do you all want that as infrastructure? Shelter?
I think that's under FEMA. Yeah, I don't think the state has a whole heck of a lot to,
Just wanted to clarify.
but thank you.
But
Um,
wait a minute, we were talking about the hurricane shelters, that's state. The hurricane shelter, you said it earlier, that it's part of the state.
Federal,
Because-
FEMA.
FIDA.
The
I thought y'all said you wanted
state,
this on both.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, we did.
Okay.
So because the state and the feds, their programs don't talk to each other, we have to submit it to the state, they submit it and,
So we ought to put that on the public safety, is
Is it
what you're
under
saying?
either
or
public
on
safety or infrastructure?
Safety,
Infrastructure or
Either
public
one,
safety?
either one, whatever
We'll
y'all.
put it under.
Which one has the least amount of bullet points is what I would do.
Folks, I don't know.
The infrastructure one, so it'll be noticed
I
easier.
think you did, because I think you added more under the other one.
All right, so we have a consensus to put that under the infrastructure?
Yep.
Duly noted.
Apparently by the laughs, yes, no, I don't know how to respond to
it's
that.
like, it's a bullet point, so, all
I know.
right. I wouldn't put it under that particular one, and I
Specifically saying
don't.
that because of the least amount of bullet points to be
Yeah,
noticed.
but put it where it properly goes. I mean, under public safety and wellness, there are a lot of issues, and we should not be embarrassed by, listing it in the proper place, so.
I'm just trying to get it noticed better.
Yeah.
are we putting it under infrastructure or under public safety?
I think it does fall under public safety. I agree with Commissioner Luke. I think that we really need to have it where it belongs and,
You put it somewhere where it doesn't belong, they're just gonna toss it out of their head.
okay. I'm fine with that, wherever it belongs.
The
Okay, we'll put
environmental,
it in the public safety then.
the environmental points that are on here are great little bullet points for, under that section.
Yeah, I would just shorten it and make it more sweet
Yep.
and,
Yeah.
yeah, put some sugar on it. And that's it. That's all I got.
So Mayor, you have a consensus of maybes on that one.
So, Commissioner Luke, yes?
Yes.
Yes, Commissioner Emmerich, maybe or
Yes.
yes? Okay. So that's a consensus across the board. Commissioner McDowell?
Yeah, home rule, I'm kind of tired of the state giving us all these unfunded mandates.
Apparently,
that
they
we-
don't care about our home rule little section there ever.
I know, but we need to probably shorten it up and make it a top priority, because this is affecting us, and our citizens just don't understand that these unfunded mandates, they think it's us doing it. I mean, right down to permitting, But if we just, probably just stick with the first sentence and have it its own category under home rule, and make that our top priority, because these unfunded mandates are costing our city and our taxpayers dearly. I mean, we had to do a consult, we had to hire a consultant, I think, for something, I think it was with utilities, that cost us like $100,000. I mean, it all
With
adds
doing
up.
that, I agree with doing that, strategically also putting that in front of
Thank you.
that
That's what I was-
hospital part.
Oh, no, I was gonna,
I think is brilliant, so I think the home rule needs to be number one, and
We're
it
almost
can
there.
just be addressed shortly. But yeah, I
Just
agree.
that,
I personally think you should put it in the front. where it talks about Northport facts and then our information, and I would literally have it dead center in the middle of it in bold print.
Home
We support
rules.
home rule authority,
100%.
100% or something. You know what I mean? I mean, short, sweet, bold, right in the middle of the first page, front page, and I would put it on the federal one as well.
Vote for me because I'm gonna give you homestead exemption, but hate your municipality because they're raising your millage.
I
It's a
understand
cat
that
and
it
mouse
would
game.
draw attention when you're looking at that side, but I've watched them in their offices, and they turn to that side where they're all listed. So I'm a little afraid that they might not flip back over.
I just would like to see it separated somehow, like
Put them
maybe put it above where it says legislative priorities and,
You give it a different font.
you know what I mean? And just make it,
Yeah.
I don't know, bigger, bolder.
Can you do a pop-up book? So when you open it, it says home rule.
I like that.
Just pops up, home rule. A hologram.
Hologram.
Whoa, now we're talking.
Wow, yes.
Josh will be mad at you, but now we're talking. All
We
right.
just put it on both sides, that way then they can't miss it, and it really then becomes a top priority.
Well, I don't mind it being the top one we have on the legislative priority side, but maybe we do put the title or right in the middle of the front where it says home rule 100%. We are home rulers or something, yeah. And then on the back, we could have a little description of what it means to us. Does that sound good, Commissioner Luke?
I like that idea.
To do both
You're gonna
sides,
address it
kinda.
on one side
And then title it on
And
one
then-
side
and then-
as a banner
and then maybe a little description on the back side. I like that.
as to what it means to us.
Amazing how many people end up in the state never having served in the local government and do not understand that it is the citizens of this state that voted in as a constitutional amendment the right for home rule. And they think somehow these cities who come up with these independent ideas are somehow wacky. No, we're not. We're standing for individuality as a municipality given to us by the citizens of this state. They need to be serving in local government before they go to state.
Fan of that.
Required 1/4 a year, serving right here.
Oh, if they did some of the shenanigans they do up there, the people would
Or
be
even a
voting
month a
them
year,
out
give us
before
a
it even
break, they
came
come down
election
for 1
time.
month and then see what it's like.
Oh, no breaks. No breaks. So I am, so you have consensus
I have a
on the home
consensus
rule
for the both sides,
issue,
and
for
yeah.
the both sides. But I would also do the same with federal. Maybe not so blatant, or having it on the front and the back address, but there's sometimes that the federal authorities also,
Yes.
you know, circumvent the states and
Yeah.
the
They preempt
municipalities,
state, and
so.
state doesn't like federal doing it to
Yeah.
them, but they turn around then and do it to us.
So
Put
can
it on both
we,
sides for the federal, too. Do it like we're doing it on the state for the federal one.
I guess if there's anywhere to do it, it would be on the federal one because of the fact we have less on the federal, but I say it needs to be addressed on the federal as well.
Sounds good to me. I don't think it hurts anything to do it,
Right.
just to keep it in people's faces.
Yep.
Commissioner McDowell, you all right with that? I am. Commissioner Emmerich?
Yes, sir.
Across the board.
All right, that's all I got.
Hey, does anybody else?
Um,
We want to move on to public comment if we don't?
Are we going to do anything with, what was it? Hold on. I had to. I guess that's it. Oh, this communication service tax and zoning, because I know the state's trying to do stuff with our zoning.
We can make bullets underneath that under home rule if you wanted.
Yeah, there you go. That's a good place for a bullet point, I guess.
On the priority side,
that's
the
what-
front side can just be.
Yeah, maybe with the home rule, just a one sentence of what that means, at least from our perspective, and then a couple of bullet points below that.
We had talked about CDDs and HOAs being exempted. instead of being part of the city with the rules and regulations that they do at the state level, where they'll make a rule, and I'll pick on gardens, even though this didn't happen, where you cannot regulate gardens except if you're in a CDD or HOA. They do that a lot on their rules and regulations, and we were trying to get them to stop doing that. We had talked about that, and I don't know if that's something.
Your attorney can tell you better, but the CDD and HOA can't exempt.
The state exempts them
well,
from
like-
regulations.
Well,
State
It's
exempts
because
the
they
CD.
don't recognize that a city has the same abilities as an HOA. They somehow make the HOA and CDD special.
Right.
But we are just like them, setting our own rules.
we can
and-
add
and
that
they
as a
don't
bullet
acknowledge
if that's the consensus.
I don't know.
I don't know how it'd be
personally
worded.
think that you ought to just leave home rule as minimal as possible,
Oh,
because
I-
we don't know what's going to happen this session. Nothing's been proposed. They can talk all they want, but until it really goes through its first session, then I just,
I agree that home rule should be huge foremost in its own little thing. But I know that we had talked about CDDs and HOAs being exempted, and this is just based on previous conversations I was remembering, that's all. I didn't know if you wanted to have that included.
I think it's a talking point when we get to their offices.
yeah.
Could be. All right.
I just interject here. CDDs are independent governmental entities, but HOAs are not. HOAs
Right.
don't have any kind of zoning power to regulate any of this stuff. When you buy a property that's in an HOA, it has deed restrictions that you voluntarily enter into in your deed. And the HOA, because you've agreed to it in your deed, can enforce those covenants by fining you. And ultimately, those fines can go to foreclosure and they can foreclose on your property. But they can't enforce any kind of laws. And the HOA cannot just enact any kind of law that it wants to. It has to be these deed regulations that you've consented to as the property owners. They can't take the place of the government. So I just think there might be some confusion there between CDDs and HOAs. They do not have the same kind of powers. And HOAs do not at all have the powers of the government. And there's nothing that keeps us from enforcing our laws as well as state laws within HOAs. That's property just like anywhere else in the city. It's just that on top of that, the HOA can also enforce its own deed restrictions. But it
And
does not take the place of the city.
you to state with us so you can explain that to all of those guys up there. Because that is exactly what we do. Somebody moves to a city, and by moving in and becoming a citizen, they are agreeing to the laws that we have to abide by them, just like somebody choosing to go to an HOA decides to move there for those things. So, and they just try to give the HOA far more power than they
Yeah,
actually give to
they-
a city. They don't
do.
understand it.
All right, we're going to move on to public comment. Mr. Willis and Mr. English.
Thanks for
It's
joining us.
not your first
guys.
rodeo, so you know how to do it.
Justin Willis, Monguy Road. One thing that I kind of you guys talked about is the CDs directly. We have shifted in North towards where a lot of our seniors are unable to afford to leave here and are having to leave. They are moving back into home, they are moving back up north. This is something that's affecting our community at a high rate, and we need to pay attention to that and make sure that the state is also paying attention to it. The second thing is, isn't Sarasota Memorial a publicly owned hospital owned by us? So I mean, if we're gonna do that, maybe it's owned by the people and ran by the board, is it not? It's, you're
Funded.
shaking.
It's funded. It is a
Theoretically.
legislative taxation that puts it in place.
But it's still publicly owned, correct? That's the whole reason of why the funds went to SMH and not Bayfront or what was Bond Secure at the time, was because SMH was privately owned, was publicly owned and ran by a board that is elected by the
It
community.
is, it's a public hospital.
So when you start talking about
It's a
removing
public
that fund from them, I think we're talking about giving it to somebody else. I don't think that it's that simple of a give, being that we were giving it to a public entity ran by an elected board. Bond Secure does not have Bayfront now, does not have an elected board. It is an appointed board, so it is different. It's a level of oversight that you're putting on the monies that are being spent and giving the public the ability to have some form of oversight over that. So I think that that part of it is a bigger conversation than just removing the money from one and giving it to the other. If you look at a few of the hospitals up in DC, they are public community hospitals and are publicly funded, but the other hospitals in the area still are not because they are privately owned and funded. SMH is not necessarily using the funds for the indigent people here in Northport. I know that I still have SMH bills from over 10 years ago that are still sitting on my credit from whenever I didn't have insurance. I was a single person with no income, and still to this day, I cannot get them to even budge on those amounts by even a few pennies to be able to pull them off of my credit and pay them. So that's another thing that we need to really consider there. The opioid crisis is not only affecting the young people in our community, it's not only affecting the veterans, it's not only affecting the drug addicts, but I work in the senior community in healthcare, where I am watching seniors who are overdosing on opioids that are having buildups in their system. So as we're having this opioid conversation, it needs to be a wider conversation and not just based off of drug addicts. It needs to be based off of the entire healthcare aspect of what is happening with that. Criminal reform, I know that the president is pushing it. I know that it's a big conversation that's passed, but it needs to be something that we're really, really tackling and realizing that we have several individuals who have young children who have gone to jail from our area for less than an ounce of marijuana, who are still sitting in our prison systems, and it's time for us to put a fix to it. And the thing with the water was water quality is what you were looking for there.
Thank you.
So, thank you.
Thank you, Justin.
Mayor, can I just real quickly, as Chuck comes down?
Yep.
I agree. I forgot all about that. The criminal reform, I think it should be addressed on both state and federal levels. That's going to get some serious traction this year, mostly because of the fact that of the prison population.
I think it can go under public safety and well-being,
That's- yep.
in the state.
Yep.
In the federal, what bullet points did we have there? Could slide.
We don't
over.
have any of those. We got FEMA changing the classification for medical marijuana, and then we could put,
Maybe put
that out.
put the classification under a more generalized aspect
Right.
of criminal reform.
right,
I was,
Use criminal reform as kind of the title.
yeah, you could
And
do
then-
that and then
and then we
put the
could bullet
medical
point.
marijuana as the
Yeah.
sub-point under
you guys
that.
are both saying the same thing.
Yeah.
Yep, criminal
I just said it from the
reform.
front, she said it from the back.
Yeah, so,
Covered both sides of that.
yeah, criminal reform and then having
Sandwiched it.
Yeah, we sandwich that sucker.
the classification for medical marijuana changed and I guess leave it at that, because we'll see what they do on
Right
the
now,
Fed
and
side,
see what
yeah.
they do, and that'll help us.
And then on the state side, it would go under the public
That's what I
safety
would do.
aspect. Can we get a consensus for
Commissioner
that?
Luke? You good?
Yes.
Mr. McDowell?
Yep.
I'm good, Commissioner
Yes.
Rich? Okay, there we have it. Okay, Mr. English. Just kidding, we're gonna talk some more. No, go ahead, come on.
Sorry, Bill, if I didn't do it now,
Believe me, I'm not gonna take up.
if you didn't do it now, I'd never get it done.
The primary concern
Name.
oh yeah, I forgot about that part. Chuck English, Northport. The primary concern of the commission, as I understand it, is the health, safety, and welfare of its citizens. Okay. Commissioner McDowell brought up an issue, not really an issue, as it relates to people coming in and utilizing the shelters when there's barely enough shelters for the people we have.
That was me.
Okay, so, the other issue that maybe we're taught is water quality. The health, safety, and welfare of our citizens is greatly dependent on our water quality. And I don't just mean the water we drink. Okay? That is one of the concerns that I don't really see being addressed more thoroughly than it should be. Especially as everybody knows the recent events with the allergy and all that. But health, safety, and welfare of our citizens. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. We've wrapped up public comment. Is there any commission communication, Commissioner Luke?
I went to a couple of joint meetings with Buchanan and Gruder, and something to articulate or a little bit more of what the last speaker just said. Gruder's brought up something that we probably all remember. If you grew up around the ocean, you were told, go to the ocean if you've got a cut and it will heal. Now, you don't go to the ocean for healing, you get a bacteria in that cut. You stay out of the water. And so we are talking about water quality all over. The red tide is a horrible bacteria that makes people sick. We don't know what long-term is going to have. Blue-green algae is the same. But those joint meetings were very good between the two of them. And I would encourage anybody who can get some time to meet with those guys while they're home, please do so. And then last night, Island Walk has a new CERT group. And they had Solid Waste and myself come, and they're a very proactive community as far as environment and trying to do things right. And so just thank you to them for being the stellar type of community that they are. Thank you.
Commissioner McDowell?
Yeah, Mayor, I don't know, do we want to have staff produce these and then send us a rough copy? Because there was a lot of conversation, I just want to make sure.
Oh, yeah, I
that it
want to
gets-
see it first before we
That's
do
what I'd like
anything.
to make sure we
Absolutely.
get
And
a
I would assume
consensus
you would
on.
do that, yeah.
Well, we didn't discuss it.
No, I know.
So I'd like to see if we could get a
Yeah.
consensus to bring this back
Yes, please
before they
bring it.
go out and print.
What's our deadline, though? Don't, we have to
I
have,
mean, you've got, for the state, January, I don't know about the feds.
I thought that we had to have this together for our
Delegate?
delegation
Which is in
meeting
September.
in September.
So if we could just maybe put this as a,
Well, you get us a rough draft.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
I really think we need to see it just to make sure. So we've got 3 meetings in July that we can
Yep.
pick.
We can put it on one.
Yep.
Yep, so are you all right with that?
Yeah.
Just get us a rough draft, yeah.
Totally fine with
It doesn't have to be on an official card or nothing, you know, unless you have it ready, but just a rough.
We'll try to put it on one of the agendas.
Yeah.
Thank you. Do we have a consensus? I don't know.
Yes.
Yes.
That's all I had. I
Okay.
just wanted to make sure that that was clear.
Good. I don't have anything. I do want to remind everybody of the Freedom Festival at the Cool Today Park. I'm so excited about that. I think it's going to be a great first-time event.
And it's free.
And it is free.
People are saying
It
that
it doesn't
there's
mean
a
the
charge.
beer's free if you go in there and you go to
Yeah.
the tiki bar. The restaurants in there may not be free, but the event is free. So absolutely. Commissioner Carrison.
Nope.
Commissioner Emmerich.
I have a question for the board, because when we were talking throughout the budgets, we had brought up about the neighborhood signage, and staff had requested that we did 1, but there was like 5 proposed. I would like to ask, like, for a consensus, if we could have staff go out there prior to us coming back and looking at that again, to get pictures of what they currently look like.
Oh, that's a great
Have a
idea.
whole big discussion on this.
I know we're
subject.
supposed to have a discussion on it, but I'd like to see pictures, because
Yeah.
like Commissioner Luke had mentioned, well, maybe we could do 5, which I'm in agreement of, but maybe only 3 really
We're
need attention
in
right now.
bad shape. That's a great idea.
So I wanted to get with the board while we were here to see if we can direct staff to do that.
I would.
Yeah, I'm fine. 'Cause
I'm good.
I think some of them don't even have signs, so.
Right, so if there's nothing there, well, I guess that's a need then.
Picture of the tree.
The picture of the tree, right?
Grass photos.
The grassroots, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
for
I'm
it,
good.
but I really think that the bigger conversation needs to happen sooner than later. We gave a direction on having the conversation about the neighborhood signage, and, you know, who owns the signs, where are the signs, that kind of stuff, and we're still waiting for that, and that is a very integral part of the budget talks and to be able to make these decisions. So I'm for having the pictures like you suggested, but getting the directive finalized and brought to us so we could have a bigger discussion is just as important.
But to me, it comes in that discussion, yeah.
I just think it was part of it, that's all, that's the reason why I brought it up.
Me too.
I'm good.
Yep.
Okay, you have consensus. City attorney,
That's all I had.
you have anything? Okay. City manager?
No, sir, I'll see you at the stadium.
All right, city clerk? We're adjourned. You did not move.